Connecting WordPress with Azure AD and Microsoft 365 is super easy. Hi, I'm Marco, and in this video I would like to show you just how easy it is to embed a SharePoint online document library in a WordPress page or post. To achieve that, I must extend the functionality of WordPress. And to do that, I simply install the WPO 365 login plugin that I can download for free from the WordPress plugins directory. By default, the WPO 365 login plugin will help you to enable Microsoft, or actually Azure AD based single sign-on for WordPress. Meaning your end users, your website users, can sign in with their Azure AD account rather than using a separate WordPress username and password, WordPress credentials. Because the WPO 365 login plugin enables your users to sign in with their Azure AD account, it is also able to retrieve, to connect with Microsoft 365 services such as SharePoint Online, Power BI, Yammer, Microsoft Graph, Azure AD on behalf of that user. And because of this advantage, the plugin actually includes a number of very useful apps if you want to integrate these Microsoft 365 services into your WordPress website. In this video, I will show you how you can configure a WordPress Gutenberg block to embed a SharePoint online document library for users that signed in with their Azure AD account, with their Microsoft account. It's also possible to make documents in SharePoint available to users who did not sign in with their Azure AD account. I will make a reference to the documentation that explains you what additional steps you need to take in order to implement this scenario where anonymous users can also access documents in an otherwise secured environment from SharePoint. So, enough said, let's get started. For this video, I am using a simple WordPress website that I am hosting at wpengine.com. I've already also installed the WPO 365 login plugin, and I configured its base functionality to allow for Microsoft-based, Azure AD-based single sign-on for the website's users. So let's click the Sign In with Microsoft button, and this will give me access to my website. I can pick the Azure AD account that I need, that is mine, and this will give me access to my website, and I can access the WordPress admin dashboard. For this video, I will follow the instructions that you can find online when you navigate to WPO365.com. You can follow the link for support and documentation, and you'll notice a section that contains all the articles that explain you how to install the Microsoft 365 apps that are all part of the WPO 365 login plugin or one of its extensions. For this video specifically, we are interested in configuring the Gutenberg block, so I'll click the link and I will have a look at the article. And the first thing that I notice is that the features are divided in two groups. One group of basic features is included in the block that comes with the WPO 365 login plugin that you can download for free from the WordPress plugins directory. And another group of features, these are the premium features, you must add by purchasing a premium package from the WPO365.com website. The basic features include connecting to a SharePoint online library and displaying files from a root folder of a document library. You can provide translations for some of the error messages, and you can test your configuration before you publish the page. The premium package adds to that. It adds the ability for users to navigate into folders and back up using a breadcrumb navigation. It also allows you to provide access to a specific SharePoint online document library for anonymous users that did not sign in with their Azure AD account. It also allows you to actually switch the data source of the app. You can choose between SharePoint Online, OneDrive, or you can show a list of recently used documents by the user that signed in with his or her Azure AD account. You could also have the ability with the premium package to pull in data from custom fields, from custom SharePoint columns, and you can finally, I would say, define how the information in that column is displayed. Is it a date, or is it a number? Does it need 2 decimals, or is it a string? There are many options at your disposal. I also won't show that actually in this video, but you can follow the documentation if you have need for that. Let's have a quick look at the list of prerequisites. The things that we must have completed before we can start with the actual integration of SharePoint Online into your WordPress website. Well, first of all, we must have configured the single sign-on capability of the WPO 365 login plugin. Unless we would like to configure anonymous access. However, anonymous access is not a topic of this video. If you are interested in configuring anonymous access, then I recommend that you scroll down. You'll find a section on configuring anonymous access, and it guides you step by step through the process. For this video, we will assume that the user will sign in with Azure AD so that the plugin is able to retrieve an access token on behalf of that user. And with the access token, the plugin is able to connect to Microsoft Graph and to retrieve data from Microsoft Graph from SharePoint. And having said that, that's also the second prerequisite that we must have configured, namely the integration portion of the plugin. If you haven't done that yet, then don't worry. I will repeat the steps in this video. Then, last but not least, you must be a global administrator of your Azure AD tenant, or at least have a very good close contact to the person who is, so he or she can help you with some small changes that you need to make and need to apply to the app registration that you created when you configured single sign-on. And you must be an administrator for your WordPress website. So, enough said. Let's get started with the actual configuration of the integration portion of the plugin. So let's enable the integration of SharePoint Online into your WordPress website. To do that, you can follow all the steps explained in this article, or alternatively, we could also immediately switch back to WordPress admin, scroll down to our WPO 365 configuration pages, and if we select here the single sign-on configuration page, you will notice that there is a very useful link in front of the application client ID field, and if I click it, it will take me immediately to the app registration that we created when we configured the single sign-on portion of the WPO 365 login plugin. So what we need to do to enable the integration of SharePoint into WordPress is that we need to add a permission to read all sites. So we click API permissions, and here we click to add a Microsoft Graph delegated permission to sites read all. So if I scroll down, I should already see it here. It's filtered, great. And I add this permission. At this moment, I'm adding a delegated permission. So administrators don't need to worry that users can now read all sites, because that's not the case. They can read all sites where they actually have access to. So they cannot read sites where nobody has granted them specifically, those users, access to. It's a delegated permission. The application version of this permission, however, would override an individual assignment of permissions to read files in a site. But in this case, it's a delegated permission. So administrators don't need to worry too much about it, I would say. Well, I'm almost done, but you can see that I haven't granted yet admin consent, and this is always needed. After every change you make to the API permissions, please click the Grant Admin Consent button. not doing so may result in errors, may result in a not working application. So I click yes to grant consent, and so far I'm actually have done what the documentation tells me to do. I've granted this extra permission. Am I done now? I'm not 100% sure, but there is a very useful tool that would help me understand whether I'm almost there or not. So I would go back to my WordPress admin, to my WPO 365 configuration pages, and I would click the plugin self-test, and I would start the plugin self-test. Basically, the plugin will now test many of its functions, whether they are working, whether they are properly configured, whether there are permissions found, whether it is set up to do what it does best, basically whether single sign-on is working, as you can see here, that's the first section, whether the plugin is configured correctly or not, and you have to be very careful, you have to look very careful if there is something not okay, if a test has not passed, then please have a look whether it should or not. But in this case, I haven't configured the domain hint, but that's of lesser importance, so I would leave it at that. But this one is an important one, it's critical as well. It says custom REST API endpoint has been added. Well, actually, it's not at the moment, and for integration to work as expected, the app that will later retrieve the data from SharePoint needs to access a custom REST API endpoint, and we need to add this endpoint to the list of pages that are freed from authentication. Otherwise, the WPO 365 login plugin will actually block access and the plugin won't work. So let's click the Fix It button. And each time when I click a Fix It button, the configuration of the plugin will change. And immediately after, the plugin self-test will repeat. So I've logged in again, so now the plugin self-test will repeat, and I can continue again looking at the results. And as we can see here, the custom REST API endpoint has been added, so that's great. I can continue down and I can see whether I can retrieve access tokens, and apparently it seems that there is not a refresh token available. Why not? Because it could not fetch an access token. Why not? Because an application secret has not been configured on the integration tab, and that's correct. I haven't actually gone through this configuration of the integration portion of the WPO 365 login plugin. The only thing really missing for this configuration is that I haven't configured an application secret. So let's quickly do that. You could also follow the documentation. You can follow here. You can have here a look at the read more link to see what you actually need to do. But in our case, I will be more quicker. I will return to my app registration in Azure. I will go to the certificates and secrets page, and I will click to add a new client secret. And I will say it should be valid for instance, 2 years. And I will add a new secret. And when you add a new secret, you can copy its value. And this is very important. You have to copy the value. Please don't copy the secret ID. Many people did so, and it results in an error because it's an invalid secret. So copy the value, copy it to the clipboard, return to the WPO 365 configuration pages, navigate to the integration tab, and here in the area for delegated access, you need to paste the secret. Once you've pasted the secret, I recommend that you save, or you must save this change, and it will tell you, for instance, at the moment, if you are at this configuration state that I am, where you haven't done much configuration, it will tell you that it cannot be tested, but that's okay. We will use the plugin self-test instead. We have saved the secret. I will return to the plugin self-test, and I will once more run the plugin self-test. So let's have a quick look at the results, and let's immediately scroll down to the access token area, and we can see that the plugin successfully retrieved an access token, and that the access token includes a refresh token. That's good news. Without a refresh token, the plugin is not able to get a new access token, to refresh the access token once it becomes invalid. And it becomes invalid after about an hour. So without a refresh token, the user must interactively sign in with Microsoft again into your website, or else the plugin won't be able to retrieve files from SharePoint, for instance. So this is all good news. Let's scroll further down, and the last section on the page that's been tested is to see whether the plugin is able to facilitate basically the retrieval of data to support the integration of Microsoft 365 apps. And there's a little test to get some files from SharePoint or OneDrive with delegated permissions, and it seemed to be okay. And there's also some data that's retrieved as a sample, which you can view. Basically retrieves the name or the URL of the home SharePoint site. Yeah, seems to work. Response code 200, so everything is good. We're set up. We are ready to start configuring a Gutenberg block and place it onto a WordPress page or post to embed a SharePoint online document library. Let's get started. I have created a new post, and now I want to embed my SharePoint online document library on it. So I click the plus and I add a new block, the documents basic block. And as long as the page is in edit mode, I can actually test the current configuration. And so the block itself, like the plugin self-test, will also test still a few prerequisites. So let's simply click this Start Test button without looking at the configuration, and immediately I can see that there is still a configuration missing. So apparently we should have enabled the API for Microsoft Graph on the integration configuration page. Okay, so let's save this page as a draft for the moment, and let's quickly have a look maybe what we may have forgotten. So I will go to the WPO 365 configuration pages, to the integration section, and here it says that I should enable the WPO 365 API from Microsoft Graph. Okay, let's do that. And actually I'm going to do something else as well. Now that I see this, I will actually add or select the beta version of Microsoft Graph. I personally prefer the beta version. It simply provides a richer data set. You can have a discussion whether or not you want to use a beta product in your production environment, but so far I found it's pretty stable, and it normally just gives you certain endpoints earlier than the version 1.0 would. So therefore I always go for beta. I would save my configuration and close this page for the moment. And I will refresh the page one more time. Maybe it wasn't even necessary, but I refresh the page and I start the test again. And I can see now that yes, it can connect to the API. And I can see some data, and yes, it can connect to the data. I can also hide the data again. Then can it connect to a SharePoint site? And it wants to connect to a SharePoint site that doesn't look like a valid address. And that makes sense because I actually need to configure the block. So I click configuration. I say I want to connect to a SharePoint library. We are using the basic version. So if I would click another option, it would tell you that you can upgrade, and I would close that message at the moment. And I need to add the SharePoint host name where my SharePoint library will exist or is expected to exist. So the host name is for my SharePoint tenant would be, in my case, WPO 365 demo.sharepoint.com. So you don't include the HTTPS portion, and you don't include already the path like sites /contoso or something like that. That is what comes into the next box. This is where you say what is the path. So we have a host name, then we have a path. So for instance, sites contoso. And then last but not least, we need to tell it what is the library's title. So we have to really look at the title of the library. So let's say it's documents, where we expect our documents to reside. So we really look at the library title and not at the URL part at this point. This is the title, this is part of the URL, the path, and this is the host name of the URL. So let's see how our configuration is working now. I click the Start Test button again to repeat the test, and I can see that the first test has passed. It can connect to the WPO 365 API. It can connect to SharePoint, to the site collection. It can connect to the library with the title documents, and it can actually retrieve files from the root folder of the SharePoint library. So that's all good news. Let's publish the page and let's have a look at the page that we just created where we embedded the SharePoint online document library. And you can see a shimmer during the time that the files are being loaded. And yes, here are my documents. So I can view all the documents, I can click them, and the documents would open basically in SharePoint in a browser. Yeah, I'm quite happy with this, with the result. Obviously, this is only the basic version, and the basic version has a restriction. It does not allow you to navigate into folders. So if you would click on a folder, it will also allow you to continue in SharePoint. It doesn't allow you to continue in WordPress. If you click a folder, it will show you a warning that to support folder navigation, you can upgrade to the Internet Edition, which is basically a bundle that would add a set of features to your WPO 365 login plugin. Well, actually I'm curious how it would look, how it would work with the more advanced features. So why not upgrade? The information that I see here that I can upgrade to the Internet Edition is not 100% correct anymore. There is a new extension that would also allow me to install the premium version of this Gutenberg block. Let's have a quick look at the WPO365.com website. And here, if you go to the plugins, or you could actually also look at the features. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that there's a feature that is for a Gutenberg block for Microsoft 365. And you can see that indeed this feature is included, the premium version is included in the Internet bundle, or that there is also a separate app and separate plugin that you can purchase and install, and that would unlock basically the premium features. So let's assume you have gone through the process, to the checkout process of the website, and you've acquired the WPO 365 Documents extension for the WPO 365 login plugin. And this will basically give you the premium version of the Gutenberg block to embed a SharePoint online document library in your WordPress page or post. So let's go back to our post and let's edit it again. And I cannot continue with this block. This was the basic block, as you can see here. So I will just bluntly remove this block, and I will add a new block to the page, which is the premium block. And obviously, if I now click start, again, the test will fail because it needs to be configured. So I enter the configuration that I previously entered. I type the host name, sharepoint.com. I say the site, I type the site where I want the block to connect to. This is sites contoso, and the library title, which was documents. So far I have basically repeated the configuration that I also had for the basic version of the block. So if I update the site, and if I have a look at the post that I just created, I can see the shimmer, I can see that data is being loaded, And if I now click on a folder, I can navigate into this folder, and I can continue to navigate into this folder. I can navigate all the time into this folder structure, or I have a breadcrumb navigation that allows me to navigate back up. Alternatively, however, if I wanted the users to only see the content of a specific folder, for instance HR forms, then I can also achieve that by reconfiguring the Gutenberg block. So I click Edit Post, and I'll select the block once to get its configuration, and I scroll down a little bit, and here I can see that I can add a path. I can add, for instance, general HR forms. I believe that was the path that I have here, HR forms in the folder general, so I want users to only see the content of this specific folder. I will update my page again, and I will view the result. And I see that here is the name already okay. And yes, at this moment in time, I see only the content of this specific folder. So that's a good thing. That's exactly what I wanted. Happy with that. Let's have a very quick look at the rest of the configuration options that I would have to my availability. I select the block one more time again, and I can scroll down a little bit, and I can see that I have the ability to hide the message bar. I can also check the box to allow anonymous users, but to allow anonymous users, you would need to create additional permissions in Azure AD for the app registration. So this is documented in the documentation. So if I scroll down a little bit, it is actually here documented where it says scenario allow anonymous users. Basically what it does, it uses it's a preview permission. Basically it's called sites selected. You have to add this as a application permission to your app registration, and then with the help of Microsoft Graph or the Microsoft Graph Explorer, I would recommend, you need to basically configure Microsoft Graph to allow the permissions for anonymous users. Well, as I said before, it goes beyond the scope of this video. I just wanted to point out that to achieve that, it's very well documented, I believe. Still, it's not a very easy part. You have to work quite precisely, but I leave that up to you, and I'm confident you'll manage that if you want to achieve that. I will go back to the post. I will uncheck the option for allow anonymous users. What is interesting, however, is you can also edit the columns. So here, for instance, you can see that the data that is retrieved is defined in the form of so-called JSON objects. It's an array of JSON objects. Each JSON object describes one of the columns that is being displayed. And you can see that you can name the field, you can refer the field in SharePoint by its internal name. You can format the output that you want the format that you want to use to display the data. Is it, for instance, a number, or is it a date? You can add custom CSS of how it should be displayed, and that all should help you to create a really highly customizable SharePoint online document library experience inside of WordPress. You can define what are the columns that should be displayed, and you are not limited to just a handful. You can take any of the custom fields that you have defined in SharePoint, and with the latest versions of Microsoft Graph, you are able to pull them out as well. So that's really good news. To create such JSON objects, you can again have a look at the documentation. I believe it's pretty much at the bottom of the documentation where the editing of columns has been documented. So all the types of columns that you could choose from, and the fields, and whether it's a link and where it should link to if the user clicks on it, and whether it's resizable, and custom CSS, and how the data should be formatted. All that information you'll find here in the documentation. I think again it goes a little bit beyond of the scope of this video, but I think you get the idea of how you can change this. and whatever is possible. Yes, I think we're pretty much done. I think we've managed to embed a SharePoint online library in a WordPress page or post, and I think we've done so successfully. I've showed some of the premium options as well as navigating into a folder, the option to allow access for anonymous users, the ability to customize the columns and the appearance basically of the app. So yeah, I hope you got a good impression. I hope you're successful yourself by configuring this very exciting option, I think, the integration of SharePoint into your WordPress website. And I hope that you really liked the video. And if you do, don't forget to press the thumbs up icon somewhere below the video, I think. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, please, and follow it so you're informed of any updates when there's a new video that could be of any of your interest. And yeah, last but not least, if you have a question and if you're stuck for some reason or another, please don't hesitate. You'll notice that if you navigate to the WPO 365 configuration pages, there's always a question mark at the bottom. Please click it, it opens a beacon and it gives you a direct contact to us, and we're more than happy to help you. Thank you for watching.